due to the fact that my mother is very old and I have worked very hard without reward my life. Um, there's a lot of cross purposes going on because gangsters like Edgar Snyder and the Langers in Pittsburgh want to poach my inheritance when they get a chance to. And they practiced extortion and they've gotten information about me from peers and work with Yoko Ono on this project of theirs, a group project they call it, Lifelong Experience Park, so to speak. And I'm right now inclined to validate the claim that I'm reading other things for the simple reason that I believe J.D. Vance and his movement, which these people are a part of, are wrong. That America isn't a joke. When Abraham Lincoln said, "Let it be understood that we are a nation of laws," he was talking about American heritage as a noble ideal where people study and learn and teach and establish safeguards together. What Vance probably meant, it's kind of hard to decode. His progenitors, like Reagan, used nationalism as a feedback loop. America for Reagan, Germany for Hitler, Russia for Putin, but it's a nationalist feedback loop. So clearly he's doing something proto-fascist, but way off different from that. And it takes a little scratching of the head. You put on your thinking cap, what could he mean America's a joke? He must mean, I don't mean to give some nauseous Trumpy too much credit in the intellectual department, but he must be saying that boorish and um, untalented, malicious, bad lawmakers like himself have made a joke of the ideal of the nation of laws. That's the only thing I could think of. So what we're dealing with, in my case, in this lobby, is coïncidences. I coined that term. It's like a French, specialist. They make treasure tracks around something so that they can misread other incidents and respond diabolically. So it's like they leave cues to something terrible they've done and said, see, it really happens. See, it really happens. So we're entitled to misinterpret anything we see. And because of terrorism, police have veered off from their trust as guardians of the legal system and the Constitution. The police are very difficult to um, um, keep rational sometimes, as are the people who are against the police. Like the whole city of man in America has gone berserk in some ways, so that they vote for somebody who calls them a joke. What could it be, what could it mean? What I think it means is that um, we have a problem in dealing with conspiracy theories and ideas that are zany, like the rula, kakadula, money, is probably the feedback loop of Vance, which is so Trumpy tune weighs in for him. And the thing is people start America's a joke, and one thing leads to another. They start believing what they're hearing, right? You don't want that to happen. You want checks and balances. You want peer review, and so they jump to conclusions. Sometimes, well, I'm saying all this because I want to get into a discussion about what I think may be happening in the Ukraine. It's my conspiracy theory, but it's based on pretty solid research. To understand what I think is happening in the Ukraine, you have to have a little bit of background in who I mean when I refer to the Ouspensky circle. Ouspensky. Ouspensky was from Kharkov in the Ukraine, and he was an occultist. If you look at the history of Chinese philosophy, Confucius plays a rather conspicuous role. There's some invisible people. There was a man, and shortly after Confucius, who was very like Ayn Rand. He believed in selfishness, promoting himself, the acquisitive instincts to be protected, and so on. But he's obscure. When you talk about a number two character, somebody who follows Confucius, the person who looms largest is another Confucian uh, scholar, in the way that Aristotle followed Plato. His name was Mencius. You could compare these second figures of importance if you look at uh, things like Sigmund Freud's inspiration of Carl Jung, or Basho's inspiration of a great haiku writer. So you have Ouspensky. Who does he follow? Who is he sort of a number two man to? Is George Gurdjieff, an East Asian mystic who was made popular in 1979 by a film called Meetings with Remarkable Men, and the public exhibition of one of his students from England's work, J.G. Bennett, through the art of King Crimson. Robert Fripp was hyping Gurdjieff. Ouspensky is more low key. But J.G. Bennett wrote a book called The Spiritual Hunger of the Modern Child, and it's very like them to angle the way they did it, like putting off a woman on me who I believed loved me, was going to be married to me, so they could tear open the wound of the implanted neuroplasm and watch the spiritual hungers of the modern child. So this is Ouspensky kind of sniveling, that what's going on. And the reason I say Ouspensky is because I met Ouspensky Circle through the Gurdjieff crowd, who were a sort of melon bag detective lobby. They were very well to do, the way the Dulles brothers were well to do. They met at the Catholic Synod, which is across the street from the Software Engineering Institute. It's part of the St. Paul's Cathedral, which is reflected in the glass of the Software Engineering Institute, the largest semi-autonomous all-purpose defense purpose um, compound in the world, associated with the university, Carnegie Mellon University, and associated with NASA. Another place they met was on an obscure terrace, Sheridan Square, where a NASA moon rock had been held. I mean, as kids, we went on to peek at the house that had the moon rock and listen to the older kid who said he was inside and actually saw it. I don't know whether that was true, but we were all interested. Now, I got inside a house in that area, that terrace, because of the Ouspensky Circle's invite. And I also met with a prancer from who believes himself in touch with divine intelligence and stuff. His partners are at NASA talking to astronauts, and he was playing music for this terrible decadent switchboard, David Bowie and stuff. Back in the 80s, when they pulled a sort of hyper relay system behind the scenes, crossing national boundaries, making a joke of the national feedback loop that most national security drones were subscribing to. Foucault, a masochistic, self-destructive queer, went and met with the Ayatollah Khomeini when Ghabanifar was meeting with the Ayatollah Khomeini to sell weapons for Oliver North through Israel to raise money for the mining of Nicaraguan harbors, in violation of the joke that Vance calls Congress. And they held the hostages for 444 days, which is 444 has a number of different signifiers. Leslie Couch used to talk about metaphors for a metaphor for a metaphor. It's also fourth way is something that Ouspensky was into, and there's biblical things that are 444 days. But people didn't ask what's going on, that there's such a creepy symbolism, similar to 666 in this arrangement. Well, a book called Moxieland by Lauren Bukes was assigned to me about the 80s. It's a cyberpunk book from South Africa. It takes place a couple hundred years in the future where you're in a South Africa where if you pick up an item from the store, it starts yapping at you what its product promises are until you put it down, and so on. It's a cyberpunk vision of the future, and there's an uprising. Cleverly construed radical kids going around spray painting, minor sabotage, and in the end their leader picks them up by the tail, and he turns out to be the leader also of the corporation that they were hired to protest against, or incited to protest against. He picks them up by the tail and says, "Well, thank you. You've made me very powerful and popular. I'm finished with you." And whether execution or prison or promise to never deviate from the party line again awaits them. It's a comment about the way that the Ouspensky Circle work behind the scenes with Operation Medicine Man and Oliver Stone plan, which was to blow up the USSR, burn the Jackson labs down, and Clark Ferris Raypond in my poetry, saying that they were catheterizing the demons. It's an exorcism of the AIDS victims. And the Warhol queers were going along with this, full knowing that they were protecting the people who were behind the AIDS attack. I asked my professor about it. Do you think the Bukes is trying to tip people off about what happened or laughing at us? Moxie Land. So much like my middle name, McRyland. He says it's really very difficult to tell. It is difficult to tell. And similar thing, it's probably or may at least be going on with the Ukraine. What they did was a structured parameter in this idea. Outside the automatic escalation of NATO, where they could get their yo-yos out and push us beyond COVID-19. Now, you see Camila Valieva, she pulls a pussy ride. I mean, the media was making it sound like she gave her virginity in tribute, which is the old yarn of Midori Goto and the two virgins pussy bowl contest that they clocked to the AIDS attack. And she flips in the bird and takes fourth place, right? In her pussy ride. And it was cleared in advance by Putin, who had been meeting with Oliver Stone, the master of ceremonies of the medicine men. So what could possibly be going on here? Look at Noam Chomsky. He says there's two ways that are working out. One side can be destroyed, or there can be a negotiated truce. But there's a third way, which is that both sides can be destroyed, which is they're Trump. We don't want that. We don't want nuclear destruction. But there's also a fourth way, which is a complex game of leapfrog among the oligarchs. A depopulating measure followed by knowing what's going on the inside from all sides, and Trump conspires. He makes no secret that he thinks Putin is great. Even now, he goes off to embrace Kim. So makes this joke. They all know what's going on. They know the masses will just follow the storyline. They'll get into the feedback loop because we pity the Ukrainians, for a very good reason. But the people who came up with this were like Gustav Gungans. He was an actor who was married, I believe, to one of the Mann siblings, Thomas Mann's daughter or something. There was a divorce, and he stayed in Germany, Nazi Germany, where he would perform Faust for the High Command. They made it into an Academy Award-winning German film for best foreign film called Mephisto. It's a sort of fictionalized account of Gustav Gungans' career. He's like, I'm only an actor. I'm only an actor. The old line, I was just following orders. Well, one of Robert Fripp's associates, who I met when I was Lord the Claymont, school established in West Virginia by J.G. Bennett, was named Pierre Elliott, and he had pictures in his office. I had a private meeting with him, and he was showing me pictures of him as one of the idiots in Paris, they were called. He was a friend of Gurdjieff during the occupation. And they managed to evade accusations of being appeasers because they were the idiots in Paris. They just survived somehow, And however you may feel about that, this is the circle that's behind this stuff. And it's important to understand that uh, when you look at like what I learned down there, I tipped off the FBI to help capture David Ray. And you look at Christopher Ray with a 7 foot tall black man. I mean, I told them about the way I was used in the last house in the left real world theater, taken prisoner and intoxicated and battered and threatened and terrorized by people who would be photographed in Africa with Laney Riefenstahl types, 7 foot tall black guys with these friends whose names were things like Dusseldorf. She was making films with Hitler. So you have this closet sort of mesmer system of decoys symbolizing on the Stratego board what's going on in the Hitler-Reagan semiotics I've fleshed out. And so when you look at Zelensky, I mean, Zell is a critical figure because he was promoting Goebbels, but defending the Jewish Defense League and their operation on Mount Island during Operation Medicine Man and the Moxieland Tabula Rasa. So you have this situation with even the name Zelensky, Ouspensky, and it's all about Lenin's wifey, because when you look at Valeva, she accepted fourth place and she got under the hood of the spiritual hunger of the modern child. I was weeping and mourning and deeply moved, but it also made me concerned that this was part of what she'd get flips of bird at the end, right? And the Japanese person takes third. So you have, this Anna Ouspensky workabout in her Pussy Riot that was cleared by Putin in advance. So like Moxieland, they have boxes of people who all believe something, but behind the scenes, they're being played by the complicated leapfrog of the oligarchs. And this Ouspensky circle used the codes like whiz well. Means we're gonna, could they poison me in the mouth? You're lucky you have that when I said I'm deaf. Because they they'll cut off your finger. Now complain, dog guys. And this is Joe Manchin's crowd. And they're hysterically accusing people of being spies for the Russians and so on. I mean, it's grossly abnormal Pittsburgh stuff. But, this is Creepshow comes out of Hollywood. It's a confederacy. They made The Passenger. They made Hitler-Reagan semiotics. They promoted the Beatles. They killed Kennedy. They, made This Gun for Hire with Veronica Lake with that very significant song, Now You See It. And they've worked with King Edward and Cecil B. DeMille in the CIA. And they've made Night of the Living Dead. That was why can't somebody realize that Pittsburgh was implicated? It can't be a joke, the evidence about Zell. And they say, oh, you're starting rumors about people. I went to the post office because John Schulman was ripping them off. And they said, you stop starting rumors about people, And Peter Gabriel was, tell me what's going on, Schulman. And he gets busted in an $8 million museum heist. And the same exact crowd is like swooping in on me after making genocide pornography. After my mother, her inheritance evidently is what they're spying. I mean, it's how to weasel their scam about Lenin so that they can inflate the value of my art. And they're rude poetry thieves. I mean, those terrible monsters in the Beatles. who have confiscated our media and refused to allow media to address climate change. It turns out that the people who they were protecting all along were making songs that called things like Flame Over Africa, which is all about like using environment to eradicate the Africans. You have to be cautious to just discount all of this testimony about the Ouspensky Circle because they're pretty creepy. They believe in the emerald beyond. Yeah. Flippy tune. Oh, he's a caution. Robert Fripp, in my presence, said, not what would you think of a scheme of transforming the human race by injecting the blood. That was Will Zell, who was part of Northern Forest, Paul Bodler guru segment in Allentown of the Gurdjieff Circle. What Fripp said was, something in music is more important than life itself. Well, when you jump down whole PP playing your Les Paul for David Bowie, you have more important things to think about than the bees, than the planet, than the all poors in Africa, don't you?